Hey everybody, Ben here from DMC Films and Cinderblock Studios, and I'm back with another product review. This time around we're going to be talking about Copic sketch markers. Now these are sort of the top-of-the-line markers that every artist designer will talk about over and over again. They have two different points. There is a chisel tip point on one end and a sort of regular marker round tip on the other side. And these were on sale at my art store, and I decided, what the hell, I'll pick a couple up and try them out and see, if they're really everything that everyone says that they are. Now, personally, I don't like markers. My experience with markers in the past has been everything from little kid Crayola markers to Prismacolor Premier markers, and every time I use markers, I hate them. They're not my medium. So maybe I'll be a little bit negatively biased to start, but we'll see how things go. Now, other than a small piece, I tried them out a little bit in my sketchbook already, as you can see here in the center, and they're okay. I've played with them and layering and things a little bit, just based on what I've sort of been told about them. But one thing I noticed immediately is because sketch paper is very thin, they immediately bled through to the other side. There's actually a little bit of residue on this page as well, and additionally there might be even some smaller traces on a third page, which is a little bit insane. Which is one of the things why I have always never really cared for markers. But another thing people say is, well, if you're going to be using markers, you're going to need to be using very thick paper. So I have some Bristol paper over here to the side. This is your regular vellum Bristol. I have two different smoothnesses of watercolor paper. I have both are the same paper. This is the rough side of the paper, and this is the smooth side of the paper. So I'm going to be trying it on both of them. And down here, this is actually a much thinner paper. This is some standard generic tracing paper, and I have a piece of regular copy paper underneath, just so we don't get any discoloration with the cardboard backdrop here. The three colors that I picked up, I decided to keep it simple and easy. These are three different neutral grays, the N5, the N1, and the N3. Actually, I should probably put them that way, so they are actually sort of in order. So really three different grays, just to kind of play around with some basic techniques with them. So I'm actually going to start out with the light one here, and I'm going to go right to my tracing paper to start out. Just in general, I'm going to go for the chisel tip, just because it feels more natural to me. The overall ergonomics of the markers themselves feel very natural in the hand. You might think that weird shape that's sort of this oblong thing, but it actually feels really, really good, especially when just holding it. The cap itself doesn't really go on the other end, so you either have to set it aside or hold it, which it's a preference depending on where you are and what you're doing. Could be good, could be bad, depending on who you are. So, I played around a little bit. I talk about him all the time, artist Scott Robertson here on YouTube, and he had a video of him working on, I believe, designer's vellum with Copic markers and doing sort of these funny rocks with them. So I'm just going to play around with some of those techniques that I saw there and kind of seeing how they work and how they translate. One thing I do notice about these, pretty much immediately after working, I would say about 10 seconds after you open the cap and start working, is I'm pretty sure these are alcohol-based markers, so there is a bit of a smell to them, which nobody seems to really talk about, which when I first got them I was like, whoa! That was completely unexpected. So if your nose is sensitive to certain strong smells, these might not be a good idea for you to get. This is the N1. I'm just starting out with some very light shapes and lines and things. Playing around with that, and you can sort of layer them and get a little bit darker sections on each side to sort of mimic light sources a bit. So I do like that. It kind of feels a little bit like paint on that respect. So it's sort of a portable painting medium, so to speak, but it's still technically drawing. I'm going to go ahead and switch out to the N3. Let's put a bigger something in here. Bigger monument, perhaps. I'm just kind of doing similar things to what I might do in my regular sketchbook, just with a standard ink pen. And it has a really great flow. I mean, I'm really not pushing very hard at all. I'm just letting the marker do the work. And it just feels really nice out of the utensil itself. Really don't feel like I'm doing much at all here. Kind of just letting the chisel tip and the shape of the marker do pretty much all the work for me. I'm honestly not even really thinking much about composition, I'm just trying to vary my shapes a little bit. It definitely fills a lot of space too. That chisel tip is great for filling space if that's a concern for you. And I'm sure there'll be someone in the comments telling me that, no, you're using those completely wrong, you're not supposed to do this at all, but for someone who's really not touched markers before, at least in the grand scheme of things, this is pretty much a beginner's exploration, so something like that. Little darker pebbly stones and things in here. Like so. And maybe play around with this other tip a little bit. Ooh. That's actually pretty neat. I don't think I've used this side before. I think I was just playing with the chisel tip in my sketchbook. This it feels like more like a brush tip if you're familiar with like a Micron pen or a Prismacolor Premier ink pen. It has a softer point to it. It's not a stiff, rigid point like the chisel tip. This has a little more flow to it. I guess probably be good for detail work if you're doing characters or something. You can probably do, you know, hair or something that's a little more flowy. It has a lot more. I feel like this is a lot more free, and this would be great for character work, particularly anyone doing basically a stick figure outline of a person or something, and then they could go in with you know, darker and darker, adding significantly more detail to a person or to a shape or a figure or something. And then by the time you get to your darkest value, you're adding things like, you know, eyes and nose and mouth and, you know, whatever else, and details to the actual figure. I think this could be really useful for anyone who does character work by that same standpoint. So this feels pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and flip my paper over and see how we did this way. Yep, bled right through, as expected. Pretty heavy here, all those heavy darks. I'm seeing quite a lot there that really pulled through. The light ones, not so much. So I guess if you are using a thinner paper, you know, stick to the lighter colors, which should be you know, fairly decent, depending on how much you actually start layering. Like here, where I started doing a lot more color layering, it's definitely seeping through, and it certainly seeped through into my copy sheet page on the other side. So let's go ahead and move on to the Bristol paper, which is sort of the standard for markers and artists to use sort of wet drawing media. So we're going to do, again, another similar thing. I'll play with my rocks a bit. Still pretty fun. I think I'll do a more interesting shape this time. It seems like that this is sort of has to be in layer, because as soon as I go over this once, it gets darker. So that initial layer is very, very light, but as soon as I go over it once, it's like darker and darker and darker. So it seems to be a little more difficult to control value with something like this. And it's similar, I guess, to working with pen. I mean, you can't really control value with pen all that much. It's a lot more cross-hatching and things. But this seems to be a little more demanding by that same standpoint. I'm going to do a little bit of, grab the finer point of my next darker one, the N3. Just do a little bit of detailing here. I mean, it seems to work. I mean, I'm not being real picky with them. I mean, I could really start nitpicking and just saying, yeah, I hate markers, but it's certainly not a medium I would find myself using as often. Granted, if I had started using these and have had more time with them, I may say otherwise. But just straight picking them up pretty much for the first time, I'm not really seeing the appeal. Again, it could be a partial bias on my part. But I think these were on sale. They're like $4 per marker. So this is roughly $15 for these three, which is absurd. Just on price alone, there's no way I would pay for an entire box of these, given the asking price, because that is just absurd, especially considering that these will run out eventually. You know, it's just crazy to think that anyone would pay for these on a regular basis. I mean, they're seems such a luxury item, and not something that would be worth spending that much on just for a couple of simple markers. But again, you know, that's really my opinion on the matter. Other people who are more experienced with them might have a different say on the matter. So that feels pretty good on that Bristol paper. Oh, wow, I'm actually noticing some bleed through here, which is kind of interesting. Bristol paper is relatively thick too, and there's quite a bit here. I imagine if I get a little bit darker with a chisel tip, it'll actually bleed through a lot more. I'm going to try a little bit here. Just you know, get really dark here. Start blocking in some bigger shapes. Now there is marker paper out there. I've only just recently sort of come across it in a few different places, and I don't know if it would be better, honestly. It's like, okay, it's thicker, does it take the wet media? But really, Bristol board's designed to do just that. So I'm actually kind of surprised that it's seeping through as much as, oh wow, as much as it has. Yeah, a lot of these thicker spaces, they're going right through. I don't think it's translating through to my undersurface, but it's definitely coming through the page quite a bit. I would definitely prefer Bristol though over the tracing paper, just on. There's a little more texture here. This definitely is good. This is good for smoother textures and practice work, but I would not do a completed drawing on this at all. So yeah, not a bad choice in paper for that. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the rough side of our watercolor paper. And this is probably going to be a little more amplified in texture because of it is, you know, textured. I'm going to go right into the N3 and not even touch the N1 at this point. Actually, I'm going to start, I've been starting with a chisel tip. I'm going to start with a softer tip at this point, if you do some rolling hills. Despite the more texture, this actually feels like it's creating a smoother surface. Something with the darker one. Do a little detailing. The jump, I'm actually surprised. I mean, the leap between the N1 and the N3 seem to be a lot more subtle than from the N3 to the N5. And they're actually I think it goes down to N7. But the leap from 3 to 5 is so ridiculously pronounced. I'm actually really surprised about that. I kind of figured, oh, 3 nice little middle ground ones, but you know, I'm actually just going to do a sample here. This is N5. That's a terrible looking 5. This is N3. I mean, that is a huge leap here. And N1, I mean, it might just be equally as huge here. N1. I mean, it could just be the way, you know, my eyes trained a little bit, but I'm definitely seeing much more of a leap between the 3 and the 5 than the 3 to the 1. But again, you know, that's just, you know, base opinion on what I'm seeing here. Perhaps I'll do a revisited video once I've had more time to sit with these. And as before, I'm going to go ahead and flip our page over. Oh, jeez. This is bleeding through too. This is crazy. What the heck? So I've got about equal bleed through as I did with the Bristol paper. I didn't do quite as much work with this page. But you're probably going to see that on our other watercolor page as well. I'm going to start with the N1 again here. Or again, I didn't start it with it before. So we'll go N1. Get some rolling hills. Move to the N3. Start defining some a little bit more. And we'll put a big shape in with the chisel tip. Like so. Flip that over, and yeah, a little bit of bleed through as before. So that seems to be kind of the standard between all of our examples, is that have, you know, varied bleed through depending on the thickness of the paper and everything else. So my opinion on the Copic sketch markers is they're probably not worth the money. Just based on a couple of these quick little examples, I don't think I would regularly pay, you know, $3 to $5 per marker, or whatever the ridiculous amount they would ask for a set is for these. I just don't feel, personally, that they would fit into my workflow all that well. Now, that might be very different for you. You might find that these are perfect for and exactly what you're looking for. But based on price and what they can do, I'm just not seeing it. That isn't to say that these are bad products. These are definitely very high-quality markers. They feel really great in your hand. They feel really good going out onto the page. But I do question the use for them, especially long-term, especially if you're going to be using these as like your only medium. Now, as a quick little sketch thing, trying to get a nice value down real fast, and if you have the full range, I bet these would be really great for just like blending and layering on different levels and like that. But just based on these three, the N1, the N3, and the N5, I just don't see their usefulness, especially as a single use medium, rather than just simply using them as little sketch pens. Granted, they're called Copic Sketch, and they're probably more used for those smaller individual projects, not for larger, more grander scale type ideas and projects like that. But that's my opinion on the Copic sketch markers. I hope you've enjoyed this product review, and for more product reviews, art tips, tutorials, and all that other fun stuff, subscribe to the DMC Films and Cinderblock Studios channel here on YouTube. This is Ben. See you guys next time.